Welcome. I'm Brenda Durant. If you don't know me, I'm the Executive Director of the Greater Augusta Arts Council. Pax Barbaro is in the house. Pax is our Special Projects Manager with a big focus on public art. And she is very Zoom happy, so she'll be managing. She got the slide up because I get nervous because it wasn't here at 3:30 and I'd like to do everything like way in advance, so I know it's going to work. But I'm especially pleased that we're starting our summer artist workshop series with someone visiting us from Washington, D.C. So Nina Ozlu Tunceli.
Nina Ozlu Tunceli.
Ozlu Tunceli is here from Americans for the Arts, which by the end, hopefully, of this webinar, you'll be thinking of it as AFTA. AFTA is Americans for the Arts. So when we entered COVID, AFTA, Americans for the Arts, really stepped up quickly with a resource page and information. And so we made the decision at the Arts Council that we would just link to the AFTA page, the resource page, and we wouldn't try to recreate a page on our website. And we've been very pleased with that relationship. Even when we had the Gig Artist Grant, which we gave out the money from the Community Foundation with the Arts Consortium, our Gig Artist Grant was listed on the AFTA resource page, and that made us feel super smart and special and like we were doing the right thing. So when we were starting this series, we did get a lot of requests from our artists to receive the Gig Artist Grant, saying that they didn't know about any money, they didn't know about the CARES Act, they didn't know how to tap into any grants or funding for artists or contract workers. And so when I saw again that on the AFTA page that Nina was offering to do webinars like this in cities, I did connect with Nina and say, would you please do one in Augusta? So I'm pleased that you're all here. I'm happy to now just sit and listen, and I'm glad that you're here. And Nina has agreed to take questions as they come up after each segment of her talk. If you have a question that you feel like isn't covered or you're shy, you can send it in the chat box to Pax. You can send it you can send it to everyone if you're of that variety, but you can just choose Pax Barbaro, send the question directly to her, and she'll field the questions for Nina. We also took your questions that you would put on your registration form and sent those to Nina earlier today. So if you registered before probably about 1 o'clock, your question was sent to Nina for her review as well. And I know she's had a busy day. She got off a call at 3:30 and jumped on this with us. So thank you, Nina, and welcome to Augusta GA via Zoom. And I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Brenda, and thank you, Pax, as well, for helping to put this webinar together. I am coming from Washington, D.C., representing Americans for the Arts. We represent all of the arts councils, like the Greater Augusta Arts Council, all across the country. And we are happy to be able to provide a lot of assistance to both nonprofit arts organizations, for-profit arts companies, self-employed artists, gig artists, all across the country. And before I, though, start my remarks, I would like to acknowledge the loss of one of your favorite sons of Georgia, and that's John Lewis, that many of us have been watching probably on TV today with this ceremony. In addition to being a great civil rights advocate and someone who really gave so much to this country, he was also, I want you to know, a great arts advocate on Capitol Hill. I've been doing this work for close to 30 years. I've had many occasions to walk side by side with John Lewis and for him to take up the cause of the arts. And one of the most famous quotes that he used to share with us when he would come to Arts Advocacy Day, I'm going to read to you. Without the arts, without music, without dance, without drama, without photography, the civil rights movement would have been like a bird without wings. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah. So thank you, Georgia, for giving such a great man to the country. I also happen to know your mayor. I do a lot of work with the United States Conference of Mayors, and the mayor of Augusta has come to lots of the arts-related policy events. So my regards to your Mayor Davis. Okay, now let's get to the heart of today's matter. Up on the screen, you have a slide that we're going to be taking down in a few minutes. So what I'd like you to do, I'm sure it's going to be made, Brenda can make it available to all of you, but I always recommend just take a picture of it with the URL so you can save this, because I'm going to be talking about a lot of materials, and a lot of it is going to be found in these URLs. So go ahead and take that a minute for that, and then after that, I'm going to ask Pax to take that down so that we can begin with the presentation. I like a format where, because I'm dealing with such dense material, I'm going to encourage you to ask questions along the way. And I'll take a pause every so often, and I'll say, let's take questions. And I think the best kinds of webinars are when you are asking questions. Not a single question is too simple or old. Don't be self-conscious about asking a question. I've seen the full range. Okay, so if you've taken the picture, let's go ahead and bring the screen down. Great, now I get to see all of you too. Okay, so let's first start off with just a basic overview of the CARES Act and what's still available to you at this stage on July 30th. This is a major piece of legislation. I will ask, though, if everyone could just mute because there is some feedback. And then when we get to the Q&A, you can, there we go, wonderful. Okay, so for the CARES Act, it was legislation that was passed about the third week of March, and there were significant components of the funding bill. At first, it was a $2.3 trillion bill. To give you a sense, though, when negotiations first began, the Senate had come up with an $800 billion package called the CARES Act. By the time they finished negotiating with the democratically controlled House, it became a $2.3 trillion program. So a lot can happen with negotiations. I give that reference because we're going through that again, and I'm going to go through what's going on legislatively after I finish up the CARES Act, so you know what's to come. And so you also know that the beginning offer of one group is not always going to be what it ends up being, and it's usually much bigger. Okay, so with the CARES Act, because it was such a complex thing, it's pretty much it's the size of the entire budget of the country for an entire year that was done as a short-term relief program for groups across the country of every kind of entity. And I created a table, which is the first URL in that picture that you took. And it's kind of unique in the way I built it because it breaks down all of the CARES Act on all the various different programs that are within it. And it creates a matrix so that if you are a governmental agency, these are the things that you can apply to or that apply to you. If you're a nonprofit organization, here are the things. If you are a self-employed gig worker, here are the things, so that you don't have to go through the entire bill to figure out for yourselves what applies to you. I've done the work for you so that you can just figure out what are you applying as an individual gig worker or as a nonprofit organization or whatever the list might be. So that's number one, and I have to tell you that I update that almost on a weekly basis because especially the US Treasury Department and SBA are constantly updating new regulations on how to use money that they released already, 4 months ago. And so they want to get the money out fast, but the rules on how to use it and things like that started happening afterwards. So that's why I'm constantly updating that. And there's a really good FAQ, frequently asked questions and guidance at the end of this CARES Act table. Okay, so some big features that you already know about that I'm just going to quickly dismiss, but will come again when we're talking about the legislative component, or maybe I may even do and at the same time. So in the CARES Act, around April 15th, most of you as individual taxpayers got your IRS stimulus check miraculously deposited unceremoniously into your checking accounts. Some of you may have had bigger issues with that, but what you should know is that the Senate, and I think I will do the Senate, the current legislation at the same time as I do this, the House has proposed another round of these IRS stimulus checks. It would be, again, the same formula of $1,200, and it's being matched by the Senate. They both agree on this. So that's what makes me think this one will happen. $1,200 as a single taxpayer, $2,400 as a married couple filing jointly. And the only difference between the two is that the House version gives $1,200 for each dependent in the family, and it's not limited to being under 17 years of age. It's anyone who's a declared dependent. That's a big deal, and that's a lot of money. The Senate version only keeps it at $500 for each dependent, but it also agrees to the rule of it being a dependent of any age. So you can figure out the calculus on your own of how that will impact you as an individual taxpayer, regardless if you are an organization or not. This is just you as an individual. I don't know which way it's going to end, but I'm actually, though, very happy that they are talking about the full $1,200. And there was a lot of concern that the Senate was going to lower the adjusted gross income that would be eligible for these people to get the $1,200. They kept it at $75,000 or less AGI, adjusted gross income from your 2019 tax return, which all should have been filed by July 15th now. And it can go up as high as $99,000 before you get nothing, because it reduces 5% for every $1,000 above $75,000 of your AGI. For a married couple, it's $150,000 up to $198,000 with 5% removed from the total $2,400 for every $1,000 above $150,000 up to $198,000. And if you do the formula, you can see how it zeroes out. So I am going to move on to a different topic of the CARES Act. Before I do that, let me just ask if you have any questions about the stimulus check and how it might apply to you. Okay, that's a nice easy one. We start with an easy one. Okay, the second one, federal pandemic unemployment. This is a big topic. So what became very new here that's important for those of you who are gig artists or represent gig artists or trying to help gig artists is that Americans for the Arts worked really hard on this legislation as it was moving through Congress in the CARES Act to do two important things for gig artists. One is to get them to be recognized as an employee of their own, self-employed, as their own, and be eligible for unemployment compensation. Now, this is a bold move that we were very successful in doing because theoretically, the only people who should be able to apply for unemployment are people who have been employed by a group that have been paying into an unemployment insurance within the state. And we were asking for these self-employed people to be eligible to get unemployment, even though they've never paid a penny into the unemployment insurance system. So it was a bold move that was successful. And self-employed, not just artists, but self-employed people across the board in all professions are eligible for this. I still find that there are still artists out there who still don't realize that they are eligible for this. So I really make it a mission of mine. That's why I do these kind of webinars to go across the country, is to make sure that people know about their rights and what is available to them. And was done not because, I think the politicians understood that this is of no act of their own or no fault of anybody's. This is a pandemic and a dire situation. So the news here, though, is that while the pandemic unemployment began and became effective in early March, it ended on the pandemic portion. It ended for the week of ending July 25th, which I believe was last Saturday. And what is happening is Congress is negotiating that. But before I get to what they're negotiating, let me just say what it was. What the federal government did was, in addition to expanding eligibility to include gig artists, it added $600 a week to the state unemployment base amount to make available to both qualified W-2 employees who have been furloughed, the traditional type of unemployment people, and these gig workers. And that's on top of the base rate. And they guaranteed it through the July 25th. In addition, the federal government wanted to make systemized across the country state unemployment compensation for unemployed people in general until the end of the year for the state portion of it. So typically, it is a state-by-state issue going across the country of how long they will keep people allowed to stay on unemployment. Some places it's 13 weeks, some places it's 8 weeks, some places it's 24 weeks. It depends from state to state. And the federal government wanted to make it uniform and guarantee state unemployment benefits for anybody that's eligible, including the W-2 and the pandemic, the gig workers, all the way through the end of the year. The problem is it's not a lot of money. The amount of that state amount still dependent on how much that individual state gives. So if you go to Massachusetts, the base rate can be $500 a week. You can go to South Dakota and it's $87 a week. You go to Florida, it's $230 a week. So I'm not sure what it is in Georgia, and you guys probably know, but that's the federal government put money into the state coffers to extend that through the end of the year. But the problem is that it's not a lot of money, whatever state you live in. And that's why the extra $600 does make a difference, because that could be a livable wage, especially on a weekly basis. So some states were slow to get their portals open for gig workers. The important thing that I want to share with you here is that even though they were late in getting their portals open, some states didn't even go, like in Nevada, they didn't even open it up until the first week of July for something that started back in March. That wasn't true for W-2 type of workers who were furloughed, but it was true for the self-employed. Here's the difference. Most people who are applying, especially not familiar with the unemployment system, they're applying and they think they are able, their first beginning week of unemployment is the week that they became eligible and authorized. So it could be even the first week of July. Here's the thing. You have a right to ask for back wages of unemployment all the way back to March. And you need to, it's almost a full-time job. I have to tell you, it's not easy working with state systems on this, especially with a new program that caught them off guard that they didn't know how to do, of adding gig workers. But if you don't ask for it, the default is the first week is the week that you became eligible and approved. And they save a lot of money. But don't fall for it. Don't let it happen. You need to work almost full-time trying to make sure the state system amends your eligibility to, and you need to prove by stating it and attesting to it that you and your business have been affected by the pandemic as far back as when the state closed, which is usually all around mid-March. And you're eligible for all of that money. And I have to tell you, I've helped thousands of artists get large checks of all of a sudden like a $4,000 or $5,000 check from the state because they got their back wages all back to them in one fell swoop. So that's important. And that's even if you haven't even applied for pandemic unemployment yet, even though it's past July 25th, you're still eligible to apply for back wages all the way back. Now, what does this mean with what's going on with legislation now? This is the burning issue that's on front pages of the news. It's on TV news commentators. It's in Congress right now. And the House of Representatives, that's controlled by Democrats, and then you have the Senate that's controlled by Republicans, and then you have the White House. They all agree something has to be extended for pandemic unemployment. That's the good news. The bad news is that they don't agree on how much. The House of Representatives thinks we should just continue the $600 a week until January 2021. Or through, I should say, January 2021. On the Senate side, they just released their version of an extension. It's called the HEALS Act, H-E-A-L-S. The House version is called the HEROES Act. In the Senate version of the pandemic, they reduced the $600 down to $200 a week. And their reason for it is that the $600 a week has created a disincentive for people to go back to work, especially in those states that attempted to reopen early, like Georgia. And they always use examples like, you know, the clerk working at TJ Maxx is making more money sitting at unemployment at home than if they had put in the hours working at TJ Maxx. That's a common example that they use. So they want to adjust that because they want to create incentives for people to go back to work, even though in many places it's not safe. They have reduced, the Senate wants to reduce it to 200. I can tell you that the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, has said that she will die on her sword to ensure that it still remains at 600. I don't know what's going to happen. To make things worse, the Senate has also created a complicated formula that would kick in a few months later that says that we're willing to adjust the formula of how much extra a person can get with the extra federal money up to $500 if it doesn't, if it represents up to 70% of what they used to make. That might be an easy way to look at it for a W-2, but you can imagine how hard a gig worker would have to explain what their weekly wages are. Because first of all, gig workers don't make weekly wages, and trying to determine what 70% of their income are. We're fully opposed as a lobbying organization. We're fully opposed to that, and we prefer the House version. But that's what's at stake right here. They're negotiating it actually all this week. And the idea is to pass something next week, in the first week of August. And I think it's going to be possibly something between 600 and 200. I don't know if the full 600 will come through. But I'm going to pause there and take any questions related to pandemic unemployment.
Nina, we do have a comment from Beatrice from B stating, my employer submitted my info for unemployment, but I have not received any information from the Georgia Department of Labor. I have not been able to contact anyone at Georgia Department of Labor. So are the crickets common? What?
Yeah, so first of all, your employer contacting unemployment to say that you are, I'm assuming they're saying that you are no longer on payroll. That does not automatically give you unemployment. You actually have to go and file for unemployment. Have you done that yet, B?
I'm sorry. No, I have not.
Okay,
And
that's what will trigger the process.
I've gone to the website to try and do something, and they're telling me that I need a PIN number from paperwork that they sent to me, but I haven't received anything.
Okay, so if they're asking you for a PIN, that's to create an account, or it's for a debit card that you'll be given to be able to be paid. Did you actually complete an unemployment form?
No, I have not done that. But every time I try, they keep asking for a pen.
Huh. So this is new for me. I've not heard of that obstacle happening. Usually asking for a pin is a good thing because it means you're in the system or they want to have you choose a pin. But if they're already asking you for a pin, they're under the impression you already have an account and they want you to put in your pin so you can get access to your account.
Okay.
But I will tell you that the mere fact that your employer has notified them that you are no longer on payroll is not enough to begin collecting unemployment benefits. You have to complete a form because the state doesn't know if you actually went and got another job. It doesn't assume you're unemployed just because you're no longer working for one employer.
Okay.
So really go out of your way to create a new account. I don't know if that's possible. And if they're asking for a PIN because they think you already have an account, were you ever on unemployment in the past?
No.
Okay. And
I'll go.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say I'll go back in and try to file again.
Yeah, file again. And
Okay.
if you keep having this PIN problem, I would say you forgot your PIN so that you
Okay.
go through a system to create a new PIN.
Okay.
Yeah, and B, you want, it would be good to have some kind of written documentation that you can upload that shows that you have been discontinued on your current job and what the date is for that.
Okay.
Because that will dictate when you will be able to begin filing for unemployment. And you can go backwards and you can still collect that federal extra $600, even if it was a few weeks ago. Even though it ended on July 25th, you're still owed that money from whatever date it happened prior to July 25th.
Okay. I will get that information and try again. Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes, and let me let you also all know that as you attempt to do these things moving forward, if you run into any problems, I conduct Zoom office hours on a weekly basis. I'm taking a little vacation starting tomorrow, but I'll be back online with office hours beginning, I'm looking Fridays, August 14th at 11 a.m. And that is the second URL on that screenshot that you took where it says artsactionfund.org/office hours Nina. That's where you'll be able to get the Zoom link to be able to ask customized questions for yourself of this is what I tried to do, this is where I had problems, things like that. And I can help you out with that. It's on Fridays at 11 a.m. Okay, any other unemployment questions that you'd like to ask? Okay, then let's move on. Yes,
I'm
Pat.
sorry, I'm wondering what kind of documentation our local artists probably should start amassing in order to be in compliance in these requests.
Sure. So individual artists who are self-employed, by being self-employed, you are essentially running a business, even though it may not be incorporated as an LLC or a corporation. That doesn't matter. You don't need that. What you need is proof that you were trying to run a business. And the way you prove that is with a Schedule C to your tax return. So your tax return, like everybody else, is a 1040. And you can have attached schedules for various parts of your life that you're doing things. You might have a lot of people know about Schedule Cs, which are your itemized deductions. They might know about the schedule for giving to charity, things like that. For those who run businesses on the side, it's called a Schedule C, and that's specifically for business income. And what they're going to be looking for, the magic line that they're looking at is line 31, which is your net profit. And that's going to be important when I begin talking about payroll protection as well. That Schedule C net profit assumes that after you've made money and paid your expenses and overhead expenses. This is the net income that you use to pay yourself. And that is essentially what you, as a self-employed person, is getting paid on an annual basis based on your tax return. And that's why that's really important. That is primarily the thing you need the most. Then, depending on the state, you need, beyond just attesting and swearing to the fact that your business has been impacted by COVID-19, which is the #1 criteria for getting federal unemployment, is that you've been negatively impacted by COVID-19. Your business has been negatively impacted by COVID-19. They might ask evidence such as, a lot of times they don't, but in case your state is one of those states that might, they might ask for things like, show me the previous years, what you would have been doing this time of the year last year, or how much you were making, or how you were making your money. And let's say you're an artist and you were going to be in a gallery show. The gallery show was canceled. You were going to be at an art fair. The art fair was canceled. You sell at a festival or something like that. Examples like that, if you're a dancer, if you're a performer, you have the performing venues have been closed. Your bookings have been closed in general. Those are the kinds of evidence that they're looking for. They're not looking for a lot of detail. These offices are overwhelmed, absolutely overwhelmed. And so they're looking for just some clear nuggets of information. And the best thing is the Schedule C and swearing under oath that you've been impacted negatively by COVID-19. Let me just check this chat room. I think I see some follow-up questions.
I have a question.
Or are you just repeating, Pax? I see.
I'm sorry, I was just taking notes for the things that maybe, sorry.
Yeah, no, don't apologize. I think that's a great idea.
Nina, I have a question for you.
Yes.
I'm a 1099 worker. Most of my work comes from that, but I also have a part-time W-2 job.
Yeah.
When I filed for unemployment, they just went off of that. And so the compensation is really low. Is there something?
Were you furloughed from your W-2 as well?
No, I just had reduced hours for that.
And when you said they only went off of that, are you saying they only went off of your W-2 funds or your or your 1099 funds?
Just my W-2 funds, which is the lesser part of my income.
Right. But you are getting the extra $600, right?
I did get that, but now that they're going to take that away,
it's rough.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the one thing I didn't mention about this legislation that's going on right now, even though, you know, it looks like it's a big battle going on, when they do come to a final agreement, they will make it retroactive. So there's a continuity of funding, but you might just have a couple of rough weeks where you don't get a full check, but then maybe by the 3rd or 4th week, you'll get a few larger checks to pay for the retroactive amount. But let's go to your particular situation. You are what's known as a hybrid worker, which means you get money from W-2 funds and from 1099. And these folks have had the hardest time of everyone in being able to work with the unemployment office because they just don't know what to do with you. There's no easy answer on how to deal with you. And a lot of times the least amount of money that you make is from the W-2 and the most amount of money you make is from the 1099 or from your own Schedule C self-employment money. 1099 workers have to put their business, that money on a Schedule C as well, so you're consistent with that. It's easier and it's to the interest of the government to pull from your W-2. Why? Because your employer of the W-2 has been paying into the insurance system. So that means they can pull from their account instead of just paying from the government's account. So they're always going to try to do that. And I've only come across a few people who have been very successful, but it took an enormous amount of work, and they got their members of Congress involved. And what it is it's making the case that between your reduced hours of W-2 and your 1099 worker, you should be qualified for a higher state, or maybe even the maximum state unemployment compensation, instead of defaulting to the minimum amount, because there's a range of how much you can get in state unemployment based on your previous revenue income. And because they're only pulling off the W-2, they're only looking at you from a very narrow window. And it takes a lot of being able to communicate with a live person, writing letters that articulate that you are appealing the amount that you've been approved for on the state base level, because they didn't take into consideration your 1099 income. And it can be very helpful, not just in the amount of money that you get each week from the state portion. That's valuable. I mean, it could give you an extra $150 maybe even, or something like that. But here's the other reason why it's important. As you move along through the year, you may be able to pick up some gig work here and there, and you have to report that for unemployment. And if it's over a certain amount, you won't get any unemployment check for that week. So the higher you get qualified for, the more you can make as a gig worker, a percentage of that higher amount. The more you can make as a gig worker simultaneously while also collecting pandemic unemployment. But if you've been qualified at a very low level, the minimum, then think of how little you can make as a gig worker that week. Let's say the minimum is $150. If you make $200 that week, you are going to give up being able to make $600 plus the $150, $750 just because you earned $200 as a gig worker that week.
Exactly what I'm running into. So if I appeal it, I'm afraid that I'm going to go back to square one and wait 3 months for a check again.
I don't think so. I don't think so, because you're not appealing, because your appeal is to ask for more. So I don't think that they would stop anything, because you're already getting the minimum of what they're giving you. And you're saying, no, you should be getting more. So I don't think that they would stop those weekly amounts.
Okay. So you say appeal it.
I think it's worth appealing. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. But just, you got to remember, this takes a lot of work. It's, I tell people, you're collecting money from the CARES Act through either pandemic unemployment, PPP, which we haven't gotten to. It's a full-time job. It's really a full-time job. And I don't want to underestimate that at all. But it's a full-time job that will pay off, because you will get more money.
Okay. Thank
Yep.
you.
You're welcome. Any other unemployment questions? Okay, let's move on to Payroll Protection Program. This is a program that also comes out of the CARES Act, also groundbreaking, and it runs through the Treasury Department, and then within the Treasury Department, the Small Business Administration, but it's administered by local commercial banks and credit unions and online financial institutions. So your interface for applying is with a financial institution and not with the government, neither state government, nor local government, nor federal government. But the money is coming from the federal government. So what makes it groundbreaking is a few things. One is they created a loan that's forgivable. So you just have to do some bare minimum things, and the debt, it starts off as debt, as a loan, but it gets converted to a fully paid off grant by the federal government that you do not have to repay, nor, ding, 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 you don't even have to report as income. It's a really good scenario. So originally it was created and it was based on a first come, first served basis in terms of application. And the I believe the first $330 billion that they put in March got soaked up and accounted for in about 3 weeks. And big banks did a lot of sneaky things. They get paid based on a percentage of the loan amount. And what they did was they upfronted all the big loans for $1 million requests. And they back-ended all of the smaller gig worker, nonprofit loan requests, because it took the exact same amount of time to process, but one would yield a $50,000 payoff and the other would yield a $500 payoff. And so a lot of groups were told, oh, we ran out of money, sorry, can't do it, stay in the queue. But what's good is Congress saw what a popular program it was, and they refunded it with another $350 billion. And now that program is alive and well, and there's still $100 billion left in it. So if you haven't applied yet, you have until August 8th to get your loan approved. And I say approved because it's got to be approved by August 8th, and you should leave yourself at least 5 to 6 days lead time to work with a financial institution, answer all their questions, and get it approved by. So here's how it works. And you won't have a situation where they said, sorry, we've run out of money. Now you just got to make sure you do everything correctly. And this one is fairly simple too, because the second groundbreaking piece of the Paycheck Protection Loan Program is that this is made for small businesses with employees of 500 or less. And it is for both nonprofit and for-profit. And the groundbreaking part of it is that we also got gig workers qualified as a small business, even though you may not have a corporation, an LLC, a partnership. You're just kind of running it out of your home. So can you imagine? Gig workers actually have it really good in the CARES Act because you get to double dip, but not at the same time, and that's important to know. And the reason why you get to double dip is you get to pull money and possibly get pandemic unemployment, or because you're qualified as an employee, or you get qualified as a small business through the Small Business Administration and get paycheck protection. No other group gets both, 2 shots at the apple there. 2 bites of the apple. So now let's talk about the PPP. It's great on the eligibility in terms of how much you can get. It's a little bit harder. So here's how it works. It's really based for those that are nonprofits or companies with employees. The way it works is you take your total payroll, and that can include health insurance and contributions to retirement and stuff like that. And it has to be your payroll of only your W-2 employees. And this is where there's a big divide, because a lot of arts organizations hire people as 1099 workers and not as W-2 employees. You cannot include your 1099 workers in the payroll amount. And that caused some problem, but there's a solution for it. Caused some problem. So those organizations would take that total payroll amount, divide it by 12 months, and then multiply by 2.5. And that's your total loan amount. So let's say the total payroll is $100,000, and that includes gross pay, it includes health insurance and contributions to retirement, all that kind of stuff. $100,000, they would divide that by 12, which I think is around $8,333, and multiply that by 2.5. And I think it's somewhere around a $20,000 loan that they could get. And the concept was, here's enough money to carry you over for the next 8 weeks. And it's a loan, but we're willing to forgive it if you do 2 things, 2 big important things. One is you use it to pay the W-2 employees you told us that you wanted to use the money for. You don't reduce their time by more than 25% of their hours. And you make sure that they're on your payroll by the time you submit your forgiveness application. that it was pretty much that you could use about 25%, originally you could use about 25% of that loan amount to pay for some overhead that was kind of restricted to rent, the interest on a business mortgage, and utility costs and cell phones. So you could use, that's why you can multiply by 2.5. It's 2 months of rent, and that extra 0.5% was to pay for the overhead. They changed the rules over the months as the PPP was in place. And now the net of it is you can use 60% instead of requiring it to use 75% on payroll. You can now use less, 60% on payroll. And you can use up to 40% on overhead. And there are lots of exceptions and waivers to let you still get forgiven if you didn't maintain the payroll headcount of keeping those employees and the number of hours. And the biggest one is that because of COVID-19, you couldn't bring them back. You couldn't reopen, which almost applies to everybody who got a PPP loan. So for the most part, I can't imagine anyone not getting 100% forgiven for their PPP and turning it into a grant. Now, what about those organizations and that had gig artists or 1099 workers? What you need to tell them is that those 1099 workers can apply for their own PPP loan. And it works very similar to the unemployment. And this also applies to gig workers who are not a 1099 worker, but they're just self-employed, making their own business income. You can also apply for a PPP loan. And the major evidence they're looking at, again, goes back to your Schedule C, line 31, net profit. And so here's the thing. A lot of gig artists don't have a net profit. It's a negative number. And really, there's a lot of incentive to have that negative number because you want to load up your expenses so you pay as little taxes as possible, right? So the problem with that is that if you don't have a positive number, you have nothing to multiply or divide by 12 and then multiply by 2.5. And if you don't have a positive number, you're not eligible for a PPP loan. It comes down to that. So in terms of legislatively, what's going on? So because there was like over $130 billion back in mid-July left in the PPP program because pretty much anyone who was going to apply applied and got their money. The problem is that 2 months worth of payroll is not enough because this pandemic is going on for so long. So many groups, including Americans for the Arts, have made a pitch to Congress to not only use that $100 billion to allow existing borrowers to make a second PPP loan application, add more money, and create another program for a second round. And both the good news is both the House and the Senate agree. That's wonderful news. The question, and I think they're even pretty close on how much money they want to replenish. The new rules that might come up, it's currently still debating, is I don't think it's going to apply to many of you, but it's going to reduce the employee cap from 500 to 300 employees. The maximum PPP loan reduced from 10 million to 2 million. And one of the nice things about it is that for forgiveness purposes, there is a forgiveness application you have to submit. Currently, as a rule, you have to submit. They will not assume you use the money correctly based on those few rules unless you submit an application for forgiveness, attesting and swearing to the fact that you used it this XYZ way. And you have proof to show that you did it that way. The rule is if you got your loan before June 6th, you have the ability to have just an 8-week covered period and be done with it. After June 6th, they said those people with those loans get a 24-week covered period. And the people who got loans before June 6th have a choice of keeping it 8 weeks or doing something up to 24 weeks. The reason why that's kind of important is for gig workers, really, and 1099 workers. Because there is one important rule, and that is, while you're eligible for pandemic unemployment and for a PPP loan, you can't have both at the same time. So you can be smart about it, though. You can say, oh, I got on pandemic unemployment early and I'm fine with it. And you could say, oh, you know, maybe for July and, pardon me, for August and September, I want to get a PPP loan. You can now apply for that and keep it for as short a week period as possible. So your covered period in the minimum is 8 weeks. You do it for 8 weeks and you end it as soon as possible so that you are re-eligible for pandemic unemployment or whatever it's going to be after your loan period is over. It could be the opposite. Maybe you started off with a PPP loan and now you want to move to pandemic unemployment. You want to finish that forgiveness application, and there is an easy form for all self-employed people. You want to finish that application and keep that covered period as short as possible so that you don't overlap with pandemic unemployment. I think I'm going to pause there because it's a lot of information and see if you have any questions. Anybody here who's gotten a PPP loan? Yes.
Me.
Yes.
And it was one of those where it was like, oh, the whole thing's going to be over, you know, by May. So I'm like looking at it going, well, that didn't cover anything long enough.
Right. But there is a good chance that, but if it's over in May, and if you have a, even if you don't file your forgiveness application, if you use the money in a covered period, so it's a short 8 weeks, you're eligible to go on unemployment then.
Well, I'm in business. I mean, I lost half my business because I lost all the events and hospitality. All went away. So, you know, it was a huge hit. 50% of the business is gone. So the PPP helped for about, 8 weeks to cover that loss so I could still pay bills.
Right.
But now we're going into the fall and the winter. And
I think you're going to have another chance at another PPP.
Okay.
Now, let me just give you a few tips about PPP that you want to think about. One is, if you're thinking about, I'm not sure which one I should do, pandemic unemployment, PPP, well, I've given you the formula to figure out how much you can get. So you will look at your Schedule C, you'll look at line 31, divide by 12, multiply by 2.5, and then average out, take what that final amount is, and figure out how much you'll get paid over 8 weeks if you divide it into 8 weeks. Then compare that to how much you could possibly get with pandemic unemployment. Does anyone here know what the standard unemployment rate weekly amount is in Georgia?
I looked it up and the minimum was $55 and the maximum was $365.
Oh, 55.
Well, that's the minimum and the max is $365.
I know, but I thought I had heard the worst when I heard in South Dakota it was 85. I had no idea that it was something lower out there. 55, geez. Wow, that took my breath away. Who's gonna live off of 55? I mean, without any pandemic, who can live off of $55 a week? Jesus. Okay, so you, as a self-employed person, they're gonna try to squeeze you into that $55 plus $600. So you're looking at $655 a week. When you work out how much you'll get from a PPP loan, that's your benchmark. Am I better off getting unemployment for $655, or am I better off getting a PPP loan averaged over 8 weeks for this amount of money? The other thing that's really important to know for gig workers is because you have to report any outside income that you make every week and the threshold is so low, you'll get kicked out of unemployment for a week's worth of pay. And I mentioned this earlier, if you make if you sell something for $200, let's say. Whereas on a PPP, you can still make as much as you want. It will not interfere with your loan. Let me see if there are any other questions, then I'm going to move on to a different topic. Okay, so another program that is administered, that comes through the Treasury Department and the Small Business Administration, is one where you interface with the federal government directly and you do not go through a financial institution. And that is called EIDL, E-I-D-L. And EIDL stands for Emergency Injury Disaster Loan. And this is a very low interest, very amenable terms of getting a loan that is debt and will remain debt with no chance of forgiveness. But it is a loan to get you through, and it's much better than paying for things on credit card with 18 to 22% interest. An EIDL loan is for small businesses, which includes the gig workers and nonprofits, to be able to get up to 60% of your based on your Schedule C expenditures that you paid out last year. So instead of looking at your net income, line 31, it's looking at your total expenses, your working capital expenses, and they're going to give you 60%. So here, what's nice about it is it doesn't matter that you had a loss. It's a negative number on your line 31. Here, they're just looking at what your outlay of expenses are to help reimburse up to 60% of that and turn it into a loan to get you through. And what's nice about its terms is the interest rate for a nonprofit organization is 2.75%. The interest rate for a for-profit corporation or a gig worker is 3.75%. The term is being paid over 30 years. It's like a home mortgage. So it's a very small amount of money that you're going to have to pay every month because it's over 30 years. Another nice feature is you don't have to pay any of it back for at least 12 months after you secure the loan. So it's something that I think is very manageable and something for people to use as even a line of credit, but you have to take the amount that you choose. Now, because nobody's getting more than $150,000 loan, even if your expenditures are wildly larger than that. They made a decision to cap it at $150,000. But not everybody will get $150,000. Like a typical gig worker might get $25,000 or weird numbers like $13,000 because it's based on a percentage. And what you should know is that you may get an offer for $100,000. What you have to know is that the first 25, if you don't have to take the full 100, that's the first thing. You can choose to say, no, I don't need a whole 100, I only want $25,000. That might be a good decision because anything that's $25,000 or less, you do not have to personally guarantee. It's an unsecured loan. It's really a good deal. And anything above $25,000, even with a nonprofit organization, you have to get a personal guarantor for it, which can complicate things for, especially a nonprofit. And if you get offered $15,000, you can say, no, I only want $5,000. It's up to you, but you can't change your mind later and say, oh, you know, a few months go by and you signed all the papers for $5,000. Can I go back and get that extra 10? No, you can't do that. So you have to make the decision when you get the agreement back. It's a really easy form to fill out. You go directly to sba.gov and complete an EIDL application. There's a lot of talk when this first came out of EIDL advances. When the legislation was first passed, it said that everybody who applied, whether you were accepted or rejected for a loan, would get up to $10,000 as just a grant right off the bat. Well, they saw that that was not manageable. They didn't have enough money for that. So they created a formula for the advance, and it's for every applicant who applies, you get $1,000 per employee for an advance that's a grant, a gift, not a loan, a grant. A common mistake that gig workers were making is when they were applying, they were confused by this language that says, how many employees do you have? Because they don't have any employees, it's just them. You have to count yourself as one employee. It's really important for you to do that because then you get $1,000 as a grant, regardless if you can take out a loan. The problem is the funds for advances have been depleted as of July 11th. And there is not any talk about putting money into that. But there's still plenty of money for loans, and you can still apply for loans. And with that, I will pause and take any questions. As you think of a question, I'll say that you can have an EIDL loan and a PPP loan at the same time. You can have an EIDL loan and be on pandemic unemployment at the same time. You just can't have a PPP loan and be on pandemic for the same covered period. Does anyone here have an EIDL loan or received an EIDL advance? You left money on the table, guys. You could have gotten that advance. Yes, I see somebody who, the artist, Abdon. You need to unmute. There you go.
Yeah, I did put in for the advance, and I think it was disapproved, but they said that they would still, I can still apply for the loan. And,
now, why would they not approve for the advance? That doesn't make sense to me. Tell them, do you happen to have the paperwork around you?
No, I think that.
Did you count yourself as an employee?
Yes.
Okay. You should have gotten $1,000.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if it should have been before July. I think it was like maybe like in the month of June. But I did receive like an email. We'll still accept you to apply for your loan. And I think they said something. I'm gonna look at it again. Something about the information might have been need to be updated or something.
Okay, so it might be worth your time. This is where, you know, you really got to put in some time. When they ask for more information, you really got to do it. These are bureaucrats and they're checking boxes. Do you have this, this, and this? And if one thing's missing, they don't care. You're just a number. And so you have to make sure all those boxes are checked of what they need. And then you'll get it. I mean, there's really no reason for you to have not gotten the $1,000 advance if you applied before the money ran out, which it sounds like you did. So maybe they're just looking for a Schedule C or something from you.
Yeah, I just have a comment.
Yeah.
A lot of information, good information to decipher in a short amount of time. I know we're recording this meeting. How might it be available later? And I know you mentioned something every Friday that you're doing.
Yeah. So after I come back from my vacation, which starts tomorrow, on August 14th on Fridays for the rest of the year at 11 a.m., I have Zoom office hours. And it's the second URL of the screenshot you took of information. The other thing I'll tell you is that we've held several webinars for free for people to go through the CARES Act, to go through PPP loans, to go through forgiveness applications for PPP. Those are in the second section of URLs that I gave you. I've also done training videos where I go through each one of these programs more slowly, detailed, and that's also available at our ArtsU website. That's in the second section. And then for any information that I gave about what's going on legislatively, what's to come, That's under our action alerts, and you can see them based looking at the most recent ones going backwards. And I think Brenda and Pax, he's asking how to make this video available to him later.
So we're gonna upload it to our YouTube channel, the Arts Council YouTube channel, and then send a link to everyone who registered for the webinar, even if they weren't actually able to make it today. So I'm assuming that everyone here actually registered. I don't have the most updated list, but I'll download it after this, and I will email the link to, we'll email the link to everyone who registered.
Yeah. And let me just also offer, in addition, it's a free membership to join the Arts Action Fund. You can just go to artsactionfund.org/join. The reason why I want to tell you about it is that I regularly, that's where you'll hear about office hours and our CARES Act tables and all these things. But this is also where we publicize when our webinars will be coming up. And when this legislation does get passed, we definitely will be doing another free webinar. So it's good to kind of stay in the loop, and in addition to everything that you're doing with the Arts Council in Augusta, to just be a free member of the Arts Action Fund as well. So you get things, and all the emails come from me. Now you know me. So Pax, do you see any other questions in the chat room?
There have not been new questions coming in.
Okay.
We just, the questions that people had asked ahead of time included finding grants to support artists, and also I think you answered the question about if you're your own boss for PPP, and things like that. So if you have, to start with, information on grants, the grant that we ran locally, it's been expended for gig artists, but I'm sure you have information on other opportunities.
Yeah, so the focus of what I share as knowledge is primarily funds that have come through the federal government out to state and local areas. One of the areas was the funding that went to the National Endowment for the Arts, National Endowment for the Humanities. Those funds have already been used as well. They got the money out the door very, very quickly. They created an application program by the end of April, and the funds were released by the third week of June. Some of those funds, though, 40% of all the funds that came through the CARES Act that were special for the National Endowment for the Arts and Humanities, 40% of them went to state arts agencies and regional arts agencies across the country, including the Georgia Arts Council. I don't know if they have completed their grant-making cycle of CARES Act funds that were a supplemental to their annual appropriations, and if they included gig workers. Brenda or Pax, do you know that?
I'm not aware of gig workers being included with the Georgia Council for the Arts. I can certainly check with Georgia Council and do the same follow-up with this group on that, as well as posting the video of this. And I do encourage everyone to check the website, the resource page on the AFTA site, Americans for the Arts, because there are grants there. And I think we all realize, at least the 15 people that signed in for this, that Glenda the Good Witch is not going to fly in a bubble to our houses and drop the money off, much as we wish it were like that. And so, you know, unfortunately, sometimes we learn lessons during stressful times like a global pandemic. And so for those of you who maybe weren't reporting income and filing taxes, realize, wow, that might have been a good idea. But we're going to, you know, I think this information has given us great ways of helping us through what could be a longer pandemic than we originally thought back in March. And so, you know, we do share the information. We have a resource page on the Arts Council website, the Greater Augusta Arts Council website. A lot of it links to AFTA, but local information we post, but we have posted grant information as it comes through, very detailed grants that came through early March and April. Some of them are still active for even specific types of artists that grants were out there. Again, the grant fairy doesn't fly in the bubble and drop the money off. Yes, finding money and getting through the pandemic is our pandemic job. And I think that's something that Nina has said in a sweeter way, perhaps again and again during this, that that chasing the Department of Labor, chasing grants, filling in forms, going back when asked for more money, it becomes our pandemic job. And the rewards are great if we keep at it. I mean, there's certain things that I know are going to take me a whole day, and I hate doing it. But when it's finally done, it's such a great feeling that you stuck with it. And again, Nina has offered some help for us. I hope you are taking a well-deserved vacation, pandemic vacay, whatever that looks like. And then she does, there are plenty of videos already there in her absence. The meetings start again on the 14th of August, which, you know, we'll be here before we know it. And we just have to persevere through. And I think that message is an important message for all of us, is that, you know, no one likes filling in a grant application unless you're being paid to do it, which, you know, none of us really are. Although the payoff is, of course, getting it. No one likes assembling all the stuff to do it, but it is our pandemic job to find that money. And I just hope that that message is really clear, and that there are people out there where we're trying to help, we're trying to share the information. You're important. And I think the scariest thing that I heard in the last week was when Google said they weren't bringing anyone back to work till July of next year. And I was like, what does that mean? You know, we're in Augusta, Georgia, Nina. So, you know, the masters were all sitting on pins and needles waiting to see if we're having a no gallery masters or no masters, and what's going to happen in the first full week of November. Because again, those are
Decided yet?
Pardon me?
Is it decided yet?
No.
No.
And so that's what a lot of us are waiting for, because that's a lot of money in Augusta, Georgia that comes through from that event. And so we're, you know, fingers crossed we have a master's with the gallery, and but it's scary to think that we may not. So there's a lot riding on golf in Augusta, GA right now for musicians and artists and small business owners and hotels and the CBD, and you know, it's a big thing. So hopefully Google's just being super cautious with what they announced, and that's not going to be the trend for all of us. And I was wondering if we should put, before we say goodbye to everyone, we'll put that slide back up. So if people left.
Pax, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, it's just we did have a question that came in.
Oh,
So,
okay. Yes, let's take it.
Local musician Matt, who does gigs nationally, he put in a question: any comments on the credit report status needed to qualify for PPP?
Yeah, they do pull your credit report for the EIDL loan for sure. And for the PPP loan, there's a chance they may not pull your credit rating for the PPP loan, but I know that they do, because it's a forgivable loan for the PPP. They're a little bit more lax on credit rating, whereas the one that is for real debt on the EIDL loan, they do it. And I would just like to add just some parting words in saying that those of you who are gig artists, to really remind yourself that you are a business too. And there are lots of local and state economic relief grants that are being given out for small businesses. And you are eligible for these kinds of things too, for the most part. I mean, I guess you got to look at the fine line and the details, but for the most part, they are allowing it. So the CARES Act also gave a lot of money to state and local governments that they are now turning into economic relief grants after they've taken care of all the health related issues. And keep your eyes and ears open for those too. Last date to apply for the PPP loan for the first round here is August 8th. But in your mind, you should be thinking about getting the application in tomorrow to make sure it gets approved in time.
And I just want to remind everyone that this is the first of our summer workshop series for artists. So we're going to continue the series August 13th, Lee Little. We'll talk about legal issues for artists. We've covered whether or not to incorporate and which form and shape it should take. August 27th, Preston Moss is back talking about insurance issues for artists. When we have a new presenter for accounting and taxes on September 10th, Debbie Banks, CPA, will do that presentation. These are all free. They'll all be on Zoom and all free, all Zoom. And the registrations are up. Some of you already found it because I saw the registrations there. And I just want to let you know that in the past, we've had a large percentage of visual artists who attended these meetings. We have advised our presenters this year that due to the gig grant, we have a large number of musicians, performers, in addition to visual artists. So your questions will be welcome and the presentations won't be geared simply to visual artists. We're also hoping to continue this series. Zoom is perfect for these situations. We don't have to drive anywhere. And so if there's a topic that interests you, you can let us know. You can email me. My email's on the website, or call me, call PAX. We're gathering that. We're thinking of doing a session in mid-September, later September on e-commerce sites for artists, different options available. That's one that we know. We also have an entertainment lawyer on our board, so there may be some issues for entertainers who would like to have not just on incorporation, but to talk further into, you know, copyright or issues of that sort. So we have a resource on the Arts Council board now that we may be able to tap for that. So we can't imagine everything that you might want to know. We know that this was definitely a session with Nina on funding available was being asked for. We also know in the past, we've had a large issue in the legal, the insurance, and the accounting and taxes. And so if there's something that we're not thinking of, let us know and we'll try to add that in this year. Does anyone else have any final remarks? Did everyone see the slide and take the picture of the different links? We offer that through our website as well, www.augustaarts.com. Lots of information there for you on the AFTA Americans for the Arts resource page. Okay, everyone ready to go leave the Zoom and start dinner? Nina, thank you so much for joining us today. I am honored to have you here with us, and thank you for your kind words at the beginning about John Lewis. I actually met him when I went up in maybe 2012 for an arts day. I was the Georgia captain. I know nothing about national politics, though AFTA does a great job of getting me trained to go in and make my calls. And not knowing who I was calling on, I had John Lewis on my list. He had 2 offices because of who he was. And I went to one office and his staff, and I met everyone's staffer. I never met an actual congressman that day. I met the staffer who was over the arts, which was fine. Left my leave behinds and had my conversation. And I went to call on John Lewis, and his staffer says, "Oh no, Mr. Lewis will want to see you." And I was taken to his main office. He greeted me personally, took me to his window to look at his view. We sat down at a table, and I don't think I've ever had an experience with greatness and humbleness like that day. I mean, he was so gracious to little Brenda Durant from Augusta, GA, who didn't know, you know, the Senate from the House. And he was so gracious and so one-on-one, and all I could do was thank him for what he did for the arts. And I'm so glad that I have that memory of him. And then I actually can know his warm smile and his kindness watching, you know, the week unfold. But thank you for reminding us of him and that he represented us in Georgia. He was a great man. He was really,
He was.
all right. Anything else for the good of the group? Thank you all for being with us this afternoon. I appreciate it. I'm Brenda Durant with the Greater Augusta Arts Council. Pax Barbaro is also here, who is our project manager. She's great at Zoom, and she's also great at managing our public art projects. So thank you for being here, and keep in touch. We'll send out the recording. We'll send out whatever information we promised, I promise. All
Okay.
right. I'll
Thank
ask
you,
Georgia
Nina.
County Cards for the information and send that out. All right. Thank you, Nina.